Hey everybody, and welcome to the 5 Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Rory Monahan. Coming up on this week's episode, I'll cover some major announcements from Apple at their WWDC event that was held this week. Also, I'll do a roundup of all the Patch Tuesday news, and I'll give an update about the recent ransomware attack on hospitals in London that is now putting patients' lives at risk. For this and more, keep listening to this episode of the podcast, which of course, as always, is brought to you by my sponsors. And that includes ControlUp, end-to-end digital experience management for the work from anywhere era. ControlUp, happy users, happy IT. And also brought to you by Network's Policy Pack, where you use Group Policy, Policy Pack Cloud, or MDM to remove local admin rights, manage locked-in applications, Java, browsers, and mitigate ransomware, plus more. And of course, also brought to you by Numescent, the inventors of the first and only cloud-native container management platform for Windows desktops. If you enjoy the show each week, you have these awesome sponsors to thank. And now for some news. First up, a quick roundup of the Windows updates for this Patch Tuesday. BleepingComputer.com reports that Microsoft has patched 51 flaws with the June Windows updates, and that includes 25 elevation of privilege vulnerabilities, 18 remote code execution vulnerabilities, 3 information disclosure vulnerabilities, and 5 denial of service vulnerabilities. So it's actually a little bit lower than I was anticipating, but 25 elevation of privilege vulnerabilities and 18 remote code execution vulnerabilities is still pretty high for some very high risk types of vulnerabilities. And of the group, there was one that is reported to be a 0-day vulnerability, and that is listed as CVE-2023-50868. And this is a vulnerability in DNSSEC validation, where an attacker could exploit standard DNSSEC protocols intended for DNS integrity by using excessive resources on a resolver, causing a denial of service for legitimate users. Also patched this month were vulnerabilities in Microsoft Office. There was a remote code execution flaw, Outlook remote code execution vulnerabilities, and of course Edge has received some separate updates as well, as it does every month. And also patched in alignment with Patch Tuesday, there has been some vulnerabilities patched by the likes of Apple, VMware, Cisco, and others. So as always, patch early, patch often, get to testing now. And as is usually the case, I do the Patch Tuesday roundup the week of Patch Tuesday, but the fallout and the issues caused by these patches tends to unravel over the next week or two. So keep listening to the podcast to hear all about that. Apple's WWDC event was held this week, and as a surprise to no one, they announced their own AI offering that will be called Apple Intelligence, which I get. Apple Intelligence, AI. I feel like this is leaving them open to all kinds of memes in the future. But as an example of what Apple Intelligence will do, it can automatically prioritize your notifications on your iPhone. It can create images as a sketch, illustration, or animation. So I guess no photorealism yet. You can also use a natural language to have AI act for you. So for example, you could say, play the podcast my wife told me about last week, and it can do it. They have said the service will process primarily on your device and only send data that is specific to a certain task that you want it to complete when it needs extra processing power to leverage Apple's cloud. So essentially, it's only going to leverage the cloud when extra resources are required, but when it does, it's only going to share data related to your specific command or task that you want it to complete. It's not just like filtering all of your data out, I guess, which I don't know if that's a shot at Microsoft and the recall feature that's been brewing a controversy over the last couple of weeks, but probably smart to lead with at least something about it being secure, I guess. Although we'll see if researchers pick holes in this as well. During the event, they demoed improvements to Siri using the AI, but honestly, most things they asked it were mostly things it could already handle today, but it does seem more flexible with natural language and doesn't require exact commands. Like, I find Siri incredibly frustrating to use, much more so than even like Alexa or Google's AI digital assistant. Siri's also going to be getting a text input option as well, so You won't just have to speak at Siri. You're going to be able to actually do text input, kind of like you do with ChatGPT and other AI services. As you may expect, the AI will also be able to proofread your written content, modify written content, or create net new written content for you. They also showed a cool image wand feature coming to their Notes app, where you can highlight an image that you've created in your notes with the wand, and it will re-render it for you into a potential richer image. So that's a little bit similar to a feature that was recently shown off in Microsoft's Paint, but it seems like Apple's going to have their own equivalent too. You'll also be able to use natural language to find a video or a photo on your device. So that's going to be pretty cool. So you could say, like, oh, find a picture of my friend Paul where he is in Eamon DC Park at a Galway United match with me wearing a maroon and white scarf, and it should be able to find it for you. So that thing is very, very useful. Apple also showed a recording feature for calls that can transcribe your call and even provide a summary of the call afterwards, which is pretty cool too. During the main session, they said their services would be leveraging ChatGPT 4.0, but said they plan to integrate other AI services in the future too. So maybe not a surprise that there are some similarities between what Apple is unveiling and what Microsoft has already disclosed on their end, because it's using the same AI service in the back end. These services will be deeply integrated into iOS 18, iPadOS 18, and macOS Sequoia. During the event, they showed off a calculator that is coming to iPadOS for the first time, which is crazy to say. And I first saw a mention of this from MKBHD, who's a really great YouTuber on all kinds of tech gadgets. But his tweet was making a joke saying that the biggest reaction in the crowd was the announcement of the calculator. And to me, just reading that, I was like, oh, that's like crazy. Like, it's kind of mocking the Apple fanboys. Like, oh, they're getting so excited for a calculator. And then I saw other people, even people I follow, kind of making a mockery of it and downplaying the announcement. But then I saw the actual demo video for myself, and it is pretty wild. It's essentially going to provide a blank canvas, so you'll be able to create your own graphs, charts, or formulas, maybe with the stylus or with your finger, onto this canvas, and then have the calculator get an answer for you. So essentially, like, you can draw like maybe an angle and put in maybe a degrees on one side and then like X on another side, and then have a formula that's not fully complete, and the calculator will figure out the answer for you. So this, to me, seems like a very, very powerful calculator, and it's something that's going to be more powerful than just a regular calculator that you have on your PC or on any device that you have today. So I thought it was pretty remarkable. There were many other announcements around devices, including announcements for the Apple Watch, with some features unfortunately reportedly not being available on Apple Watch 4, Apple Watch 5, and the first generation Apple Watch SE. So this is the first big off of existing watches for new features. So if you have an Apple Watch and you're excited about new features, unfortunately it looks like you're going to have to upgrade. So I've already spent over 5 minutes on just these announcements. I'm not going to go into more. If you want to check them out for yourself, I'll share a link to some of the announcements with this episode, which is episode 338, and you can find that at 5bytespodcast.com. And if nothing else, I recommend you check out the video for the calculator for yourself. In just a quick story that's related somewhat to the Apple announcements, because they said they may integrate other AI services in the future. Well, speaking of other AI services, and one that's been getting a lot of prominence and attention in recent months, Mistral, which is a French company, just received $640 million in Series B funding and is now valued at $6 billion, which is incredible when it's only just their Series B funding. There's probably still going to be multiple more rounds of funding that are likely going to be even larger than this, and the valuation's already at $6 billion. It's incredible. And by the way, keep listening to the scripts, tricks, and tips, because I'm going to talk a little bit about an AI session that I'm going to be doing at a user group soon. I mentioned a little bit earlier during the Apple story, but Microsoft has now moved to quell concerns about their recall feature by updating the setup experience of Copilot Plus PCs to give people a clearer choice to opt in to saving snapshots using Recall. If you do not proactively choose to turn it on, it will be off by default. So that was one of the major concerns by the various different security researchers, that it was going to be on by default. It's now off by default. They also stated with Windows Hello enrollment, it's going to now be required in order to enable recall. In addition, proof of presence is also required to view the timeline and search in recall. Now, I wonder what proof of presence is going to be. Is it going to be just seeing that you're in front of the machine in order to allow recall to be accessible? I don't know how that's going to work, but I mean, it sounds like something, I guess. I guess we'll have to wait and see. They also said they would be adding additional layers of data protection, including a just-in-time decryption protected by Windows Hello enhanced sign-in security, so recall snapshots will only be decrypted and accessible when the user authenticates. In addition, Microsoft has moved to encrypt the search index database. So now, I guess at least the database itself is going to be encrypted. It kind of sounds like they repeated themselves a little bit by saying that proof of presence is going to be required to view your timeline and search and recall. I'm guessing that's one and the same as that Windows Hello enhanced sign-in security. So it's probably trying to see if you're there and present in front of your machine in order to access recall. It would be interesting to see how this all works in practice. Google announced a partnership with Oracle, which enables customers to migrate and run mission-critical enterprise workloads seamlessly across Google Cloud and Oracle Cloud infrastructure. It provides a rich set of interoperable solutions that makes it easy for their joint customers to migrate, modernize, and manage their Oracle-based applications in the cloud. With unified engineering, product, and commercial model, these integrated solutions deliver choice and flexibility backed by the end-to-end enterprise-class collaborative support model that their joint customers have relied on for years, according to their press release. At the core of this partnership is the Oracle database at Google Cloud, and Oracle will directly host, operate, and manage Oracle database services natively within and from the Google Cloud data centers, beginning with regional footprints in North America and Europe, and they plan to rapidly expand globally. As you might expect, the announcement promotes the idea of multi-cloud, which is certainly a sound strategy, and that's something that Google has been harping on about for many years. I can remember being part of the keynote presentation by the then Google Cloud COO, I believe it was Diane Bryant, at Citrix Energy back in 2018. So, I mean, it's not just a sales pitch. I mean, it is a sales pitch from them because they're one of the kind of more minor players. I mean, still significant, but minor compared to Microsoft and AWS. So of course they're going to want people who are using Microsoft and AWS to also use some of their Google Cloud resources. So yeah, I mean, but it still makes sense because you don't want to be over reliant on just one platform, because one outage could take down your entire enterprise. Customers will be able to procure available services directly from Google Marketplace and manage them directly from their Google Cloud Console. So it seems like it's going to be very seamless to use across clouds. The Register has reported that VMware have signed OEM agreements with Dell, Lenovo, and HPE, so they can continue to sell hyperconverged systems and servers pre-installed with VMware Stack. These are essentially agreements that were already in place, but have now been re-signed for the first time since the acquisition by Broadcom has been completed. This will hopefully be a boost in confidence for existing customers, at least on the infrastructure side. The Register also reported that Oracle has been sending auditors to some of their largest customers in the world for the first time, stating they had been issuing letters to smaller customers about compliance with their updated subscription licensing that requires widespread licensing, even if not every user in an organization actually uses Java. But they reportedly had not darkened the doorways of the largest companies until now. In the last month, official audit letters from Oracle to Fortune 100 companies were allegedly sent out. Some of them were existing Oracle Java subscription users who had renewals coming up, and some of them weren't paying Oracle anything for Java. This is significant as the price has increased by 2x to 5x for organizations, and obviously targeting Fortune 100 companies. There's a lot of users in there, so 2x to 5x if they actually pay for the entire organizations is going to be a large windfall for Oracle. So in Ireland, we have a TV license, a television license. So if you have a TV in your home, you have to pay a license, and that money goes towards supporting our national broadcasters. And in order to enforce it, we have TV license inspectors who come around to houses and basically issue warnings of a potential court summons and fine if you don't have your television license. And people who do not wish to pay their TV license hide their televisions so they're not in view from outside the home and don't open the door to the TV license inspector. So, for those who are possibly using Java and not paying anything, heads up, the Java license inspector may be at your door. On last week's episode of the podcast, I covered the story about hospitals in London getting hit by a ransomware attack and discussed how their pathology labs and blood labs were impacted, but at the time the reports suggested delays were just being faced. Well, now the NHS has issued an urgent call to O positive and O negative blood donors to book appointments and donate. BleepingComputer.com reported the hospitals cannot quickly match blood donor and recipient types, so there's a risk of transfusion mismatch that could lead to life-threatening complications. To address this risk, and until the blood type matching systems are working again, the doctors at the impacted hospitals have opted to grant O negative and O positive types to patients who cannot afford to wait multiple hours for alternative type determination methods. O negative blood types can be transfused safely to all patients, while O positive can donate to anyone with positive blood type rhesus. Roughly 3 out of 4 patients match that. Unfortunately, by taking this approach, this has caused their blood reserves of these two blood types to run low. Thus, the announcement asking for people of those blood types to please donate. There is no estimate currently on when services will be returned to normal, so if you are in London and you match that blood type, please consider donating. And this is an extreme example of what can happen when ransomware hits a hospital. And I mean, I've covered on the podcast on numerous occasions. There were these cyber gangs who at least had an ethical approach in that they did not purposely target healthcare systems. Don't know if this particular ransomware or cyber gang has that ethos or not. Presumably not, otherwise they'd have at least given the decryption keys for these types of labs. But this is really serious. This is a matter of life and death now. The New York Times has confirmed internal source code and data belonging to them was leaked on the 4chan message board after being stolen from the company's GitHub repositories in January 2024. It has been reported it is all of the New York Times source code, with the archive being a massive 273 gigs in size. It was reported there are around 5,000 repos, and possibly as few as 30 of those were additionally encrypted, with 3.6 million files in total. And I saw someone tweet they were surprised that a company like the New York Times had over 5,000 repos. And yeah, that's true. I don't know what the heck they're doing, but that's a huge number of repositories. The company said that the breach of its GitHub account did not affect its internal corporate systems and has no impact on its operations. So cool, but I wonder what's going to come out of this in the next few weeks and months. There has been a strong negative reaction this week on LinkedIn and Twitter from some in the community about Citrix's recent announcement that Citrix subscription partner use and demo use licenses will become exclusive to Platinum tier partners only. They said the change is part of their commitment to enhancing their partnership program and providing exclusive benefits to top tier partners. So you could see why they would want to maybe gatekeep this access and provide it as like an exclusive benefit to their highest paying customers. But at the same time, to me, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I'm not sure what the end game here is. They're just going to reduce exposure to their products, and it's going to lead eventually to consultants who are not recommending Citrix products anymore and don't have deep knowledge or understanding of them anymore. I'd be really interested to hear what their full thoughts on this are, and if it's more than just making things exclusive to Platinum tier to provide more value to those Platinum tier customers. Seems a little wrong-headed to me. A group of Israeli researchers explored security of the Visual Studio Code marketplace and managed to infect over 100 organizations by trojaning a copy of the popular Dracula official theme to include risky code. The Dracula official theme is basically a theme in Visual Studio Code that applies a nice looking dark theme to the product. Further research into the VS Code marketplace found thousands of extensions with millions of installs that are compromised. The researchers note that the malicious code does not get flagged by endpoint detection and response tools, as VS Code is treated with leniency due to its nature as a development and testing system, which obviously makes this a security blind spot. The researchers developed a tool to analyze the extensions on the marketplace to identify high risk extensions and inspect their code, and in doing so, discovered 1,283 that had known malicious code with 229 million installs, 8,161 that were communicating with hard coded IP addresses, 1,452 running unknown executables, and 2,304 that are using another publisher's GitHub repo, indicating they are a copycat. BleepingComputer.com has contacted Microsoft to ask if they plan to revisit the Visual Studio Marketplace's security and introduce additional measures that would make typo squatting and impersonation harder, but they did not respond, at least at the time of recording this podcast. Raspberry Pi priced its IPO on the London Stock Exchange on Tuesday morning at £2.80 per share, valuing it at £542 million or $690 million in this week's exchange rate. Shortly after that, the company's shares jumped a nice 32% to £3.70. So, pretty cool. Raspberry Pi is going to be floating publicly on the London Stock Exchange this week. It means the Raspberry Pi could end up raising more than $200 million during its IPO process. Unfortunately, retail investors cannot buy Raspberry Pi shares just yet, as only certain institutional shareholders can trade the company's shares right now. Retail investors will be able to buy and sell the shares starting this Friday, which I hate that about the stock market. And it's not unique to the London Stock Exchange, but basically the billionaire and millionaire club, the insider club, gets first shot at these new IPOs. So they could basically inflate the price before it goes to the actual commercial stock buying. I don't fully understand this. Like, people were getting upset about those internet sleuths and these YouTubers and TikTokers and stuff that were pumping and dumping stocks last year, or even buying stocks and holding on to it, like stock in GameStop that should have been essentially worthless because their entire business model was heading for the toilet. And at that time, those business shows on television and all those actual like stock influencers and insiders were crying foul of that. Meanwhile, like, this is just institutionalized. Yeah, I get that capitalism is the best of a bad lot of systems, but geez, there's just sometimes that it's infuriating. And wrapping up the news for this week, the CEO of Zoom did an interview recently where he suggested currently the use of large language models in AI services is a little flawed, and that it isn't always best to use a large language model that is accessible and the same for all, and that in the future he would like an LLM unique to him, and he predicted a future of being able to have an AI replace himself in certain situations. Like, it may be possible for an AI version of him to join a call if he can't make it, and even answer questions and make decisions on his behalf. So essentially like a deepfake AI version of himself that he actually wants to go on calls, which I think is quite remarkable, because I know at the App Manage event last year, Paula did the keynote and was talking about like very convincing deep fakes and examples of CEOs that were being deep faked and then convincing someone in the finance department or their admin to issue a payment that was going to a crook. So yeah, he's excited about the potential for this, for a legitimate use case that he wants. But on the flip side of that, there are people warning that this could turn very, very bad, because the criminals are going to use this in ways that are going to convince people to hand over the keys to the castle and make it pretty easy for them to get what they want. But hey, that's it for this episode's news. Let's get on to the scripts, tricks, and tips. First up, I'd suggest that you check out Peter van der Woud's recent blog post on getting started with the Remote Help web app. So, if you're an Intune customer, this could be very useful to you for providing remote support, particularly on those endpoints where maybe they're remote and it may be challenging to provide support any other way. This could be a way to achieve that. So, check out the blog post because it's cool. It's via a web app, it doesn't require any actual back client install. Last week on the show, I had Michael Niehaus's blog post on Autopilot v2. And this week, Michael posted a blog on running an SCCM task sequence during Autopilot v2 provisioning. In the blog post, Michael showed how he used it to figure out the sequence used in the new Autopilot release. So he's basically using it as a measuring stick to see when one process stops and another process begins. But it's very useful to see how people are using this, and Michael has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the Microsoft stack. So very cool to get this information from him. So check it out. And on the topic of Autopilot v2, I saw Rudy Ooms shared that for those who are maybe experiencing an issue where provisioning skips from 7% to complete to 100% complete within seconds and their applications are not installed, he did a little deep dive in through the logs and found a problem. So if you're experiencing that, be sure to check out this blog post that I'll share with this episode, and that's episode 338. And I've been using the new release of Autopilot recently, and I've run into a couple of different issues myself, so maybe it's just teething problems with this change. As I mentioned earlier on the show, I will be speaking at the next Cloud Paging user group, which will be on June 21st at 2:30 p.m. BST, which I believe is 9:30 a.m. for those in the East Coast in the US. And I will be doing a topic on artificial intelligence in enterprise IT. There's also going to be a session by Numescence WeFam around the Cloud Paging Server PowerShell module that was requested by the users of the group. And of course, general discussion. So if you want to check out my session and we session and even just get involved in the Cloud Paging user group, be sure to check out the link that I'll share with this episode, which again is episode 338. And finally, again, just to plug a little bit of something that I've created myself, I published a new episode of my Office of the Technologist video series. So if you like this podcast, I do a kind of long form video on a specific topic once a month. And this month, I was talking about desktop security, so Windows desktop security. So if you're interested in that, I'll share a link to that as well. I'd be grateful for the clicks and views. Hey, but that's it for this episode of the podcast. As always, thank you so much for listening.